Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Happy whatever day you're watching, listening to the show here. Another episode of Maximize Monday. I'm thankful for everyone who's taking some time out of their day to listen to us. As you can see, I have a new guest with me, Taylor from the recruitment industry. I'm always thankful and happy to have fellow recruiters and talent acquisition professionals join to talk about the chaos that is the job market right now, right? But Taylor, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to join us. Looking forward to having you share your story here.
Yeah, definitely happy to be here. I was looking forward to it, Matt. So definitely same as you, love to connect with other recruiters and talk about what we do.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll jump right into that. And it's a question that I always like to ask anyone who joins the show that's in the recruitment industry, because it's not one of those things that, not to say that people don't decide in college that they want to get into recruiting or talent acquisition, but it's usually like not at the top of the list when you're, picking schools and degree programs. Talent acquisition is usually not the mindset, but you fall into it and then you stay with it for so long because you love what you do. So always like to ask, what that journey looked like for you. How did you kind of get your start in the industry? And you've been doing this for some time now. So what has kept you motivated to stay and grow in the recruitment industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the industry about 6 years, and kind of like you said, it was not my plan, really, kind of an accident. Honestly, it was kind of COVID that pushed me to it because I was in school for a master's program. I was serving and bartending, on the side on top of that. And as you know, restaurants and things closed. And I was like, now what? Like I'm just sitting at home every day. Like I wasn't planning on looking for something full time really until I finished my master's program, but I was totally like, I can't sit on my couch. So I started looking for roles and my master's program was HR and labor relations. So I was like, oh, like recruiting is something that would be related, would allow me to learn more about hiring and maybe eventually I'll get, deeper into HR. Clearly didn't do that. Clearly got into recruiting and stayed and kind of grew in that. And the like only major transition really in that time was I started kind of at the agency level, and now I'm in more, inside corporate recruiting.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So, and that's kind of one of those things too, when people start an agency and kind of go in different directions. And it's really gives you the experience in terms of, finding out who you are as a recruiter, and you take some of those skills with you on the next step. But obviously that primary goal for any recruiter hiring manager is the candidate experience. And especially in agency, when there's usually such a high volume of openings, it can kind of get tough to make sure you're maintaining that candidate relationship. So, starting in that side of the industry like you did, what are some of the steps that you took early on to ensure that the candidates that you were working with were getting that positive experience, that you were checking the boxes for them as much as, for the clients that you were supporting in those instances?
Yeah, absolutely. Something I learned early on at the agency level and that I've carried through with me is that an interview is such like a two-way street, right? Like I literally had someone tell me this morning. He said, "Gosh, I feel like I'm the one interviewing you." And I said, "Good." It should feel like that. I think that's important. I think just as much as we're trying to figure out if they're a good fit, they need to be figuring out if we're a good fit for them, right? So let them ask all the questions they need. Make sure they have a good understanding of the role, and, even if for whatever reason we don't bring someone on or it doesn't end up being for a good fit for them, like I want them to leave there knowing I painted the best picture of the role that I could and that I offered all the information that I could. So that was always big with me, just transparency and using that to build that relationship and just being open and honest when people, ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll jump around on the questions a bit because that's a good segue to the question that we have about communication, since that's
Sure.
such a big piece of, the candidate and the recruiter hiring manager experience, is that consistent communication. And it's definitely a two-way street. So especially when you're working with such a high volume of openings, how do you try to maintain that consistent communication throughout the process, and also try to personalize it? So, right now everyone's kind of like, is this AI when they get an email or a message?
Yeah.
So how do you try to make sure that there's some of Taylor's voice in that too, without, taking the time to personalize hundreds of thousands of messages every week?
Sure. I will tell you just right off the bat, I'm not a big AI automatic generated email person. Like I love to just type them myself, or, I have maybe I'll copy and paste it from my last one, but still it was my, original
Yeah.
message for sure. But I think a big thing that's important with communication in 2025 is just to remember that not everyone has the same form of communication that they prefer the most or that's the easiest for them. Obviously, I feel like 10 years ago, everyone was like, you're never going to text your boss, or no one for a job interview is ever going to send you a text message. And
Right.
that's just not the case anymore, right? Like, especially for people who are working and job searching and probably can't pick up the phone while they're sitting at their desk or something. I've just learned to treat everyone, a little bit different and learn what method works the best for them. Maybe someone prefers, a text message because it's easier for them, and someone's like, no, please pick up your phone and call me. So just trying to learn that style and be adaptable with that communication style to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned you started in the staffing side of things and have now moved into the corporate. And one of the things that I struggled with early, because I came from education. So, when you're a classroom teacher, unless you have ambitions to be an administrator, which I did not. Like for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to be a teacher for 35 years and then retire. So when you step into something new, you really have to start looking for how you can grow your career. There's very few positions where you can do that for 30 plus years and still kind of grow professionally. So for you, when you made the move, made some of the changes, what insight can you share on how you did that? How did you figure out what you wanted to prioritize, what you wanted to do next, and make sure that you were identifying those opportunities, whether it was with the company you were working for and internal growth or just looking elsewhere?
I mean, to share a little bit of both, first, when I made that transition from, where I was to being where I am now, and honestly, like I've stuck to pretty much the same two companies most of my professional career, so I don't have a long history there. But the first time it was really just like I just felt like being at the agency level was so salesy, and it's not like all recruiting is, right? We're still selling someone a job to some degree, but it was so just like everyone was a number. We just needed to fill the roles. We just needed to get people in. And I was also recruiting in healthcare. I guess I should share during the pandemic. So it was just like we need as many people as possible,
Right.
right? So, and I just felt like it didn't matter, who I was hiring as long as I got them there. And I didn't love that. Like it was like I wanted something a little bit more meaningful, a little bit more impactful. Like I was like, oh, these nurses and stuff can go work anywhere, how can I
Right.
convince them to work here and with us and with our agency? So that is what made me want to move a little bit more to the corporate level, because I was like, you're not just like hiring someone or placing them and moving on. Like these are people I'm going to see every day and going to be able to build
Yeah.
more of a connection and a relationship with. So that was really important to me there. And then when it came to internal growth and considering other opportunities and things like that, I've definitely feel like I've always been a leader. I was a leader, on my dance team in college, and I've always just kind of taken that role. So I always kind of saw myself growing into that. So now I do oversee a small team, but I always say that not everyone has to manage people to see growth, right? Like there were other ways I wanted to see that. I think a lot of people look for money and longevity opportunities, and it was really kind of just the opportunity of the longevity and the career path that has kept me in my current role for 4.5 years. I did have another opportunity at one point, and I was like, wow, do I take this opportunity? Do I stay where I am? And weighing the options, and it comes down to so much more than money and benefits when you think about things like that, and just what's important to me shifts over time. I'm a mother now. I have a 2-year-old, and that's something that I take into consideration, because after you've been somewhere for several years, like you build a trust, you earn certain flexibilities that like you might not be allotted in a new role. So just some of those relationships that you can build with your employer, I think are so important.
Absolutely. And fantastic insight there. Stuff that often gets overlooked just because sometimes
Sure.
the unknown, the grass is always greener, all the cliche statements you can give, but having that trust and understanding with your employer is certainly something that you always have to take into account.
Absolutely.
So the next question I have is one I ask anyone who's from recruiting, and I'm sure you've seen it. It's based on feedback because a lot of times candidates, I said earlier in the episode here, the market's chaotic. There's a lot of people that apply for roles, and they probably do check all the boxes, but there's other candidates that are also checking those boxes. So
Sure.
when they're looking for feedback, there are those instances where it's just, you had what we were looking for. This person just had something else. There's nothing you can really do about that. Or we didn't think we needed someone bilingual, and then, hey, we did. And, things like that just happen. So, trying to give feedback that, is constructive, but at the same time, not going to deter people from applying or feel frustrated with the process
Sure.
is delicate balance. So, how do you try to approach those situations? What are some of the ways that you deliver feedback in a way that's going to benefit the candidate and keep them encouraged to, shoot their shot and find opportunities that appeal to them?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard, in my little recruiter heart, I want to hire everyone. I want to say
Right.
yes to everyone. And if I can't hire them, I want to help them find something else, right? But fortunately, it doesn't always work out like that. Um, I do think, the biggest thing is again, kind of tailoring that to the candidate, to what that process was like. I mean, was it a lengthy process where we kind of dragged them through a longer interview process for a management role or something? In that case, if they didn't get the position, like that's a phone call to me. I want to call them, I want to say, we truly appreciate the time and the effort you spent, because I don't like putting anyone through that long of a process nowadays. It's hard, to do when you're still working, to come in for 4 interviews and find the time and
Right.
whatever. So definitely think that's more of a phone call explanation. Kind of like you said, you had pretty much everything we wanted, but so did someone else, and we just kind of decided to go with that person.
Yeah.
And I think that goes a long way. Like there have been times, there was a time that I called someone with that kind of feedback, and I was like, if we could take two, we would have brought you on two. And then it ended up not working out with the person we made the offer to. So I was able to call her back and say, hey, like to be totally honest, it didn't work out. Like we don't want to open up the hiring process again. We want to bring you on. So I think just being open and providing that feedback, you can save yourself later sometimes and just have those connections, which is nice. I'll be the first to admit that I'm one person. Have I missed people I should have gotten back to before? If people had to email me a second time and say, hey, what's going on? I mean, sure, but try my best not to do that. Try to be respectful of their time. And I think no matter what, everyone wants to hear some news rather than no news, right? So
Yep. Yeah, that's what I usually have to remind myself is even saying I have no update is an update. So
yes,
it's
exactly.
less than a minute to send these emails. So take the time to do it
Sure.
for sure. So when it comes to branding, this is a question I like to ask people in the recruitment industry because there's thousands of us, right? And so why is a candidate going to come to Matt or why is a candidate going to come to Taylor? A lot of things that we have to do is stand out from, all the other recruiters that are out there, but at the same time, be cognizant because we're not just representing ourselves on LinkedIn, right? We are a representative of the company that we work for too, and it can kind of be a tricky line to to walk down. I've had my hand slapped a few times away in the past. I've learned from there. But how do you try to, make sure you're being Taylor the recruiter and representing the company while still, trying to give that glimpse of who you are apart from the brand that you're representing there?
Yeah, I think it's really important to find that balance because, again, like we want to talk to people who we feel that connection to or that we feel are genuine. And you just don't get that if you're just, just a face at a company, right? So definitely try to build the company brand at the same time that you're building the personal brand. Like I want people to put my name with the company and make that association, but I also want to, dive deeper and share some personal things from time to time. I know LinkedIn's not Facebook, right? But it kind of seems that people respond well when you do put a little bit of yourself and your life into it. So I definitely try to do that, but definitely in a professional way. But I definitely think it's the best way to show off the culture, the environment that you work in, and really give a glimpse into that. And one thing I like about what we do, and I actually oversee our marketing coordinator, so I have a big part in our company social media and branding as well. But we try to keep a lot of it organic, that overly produced content like is good and we do it sometimes, but I also think what keeps us unique and what people recognize about the brand that I've helped build is that it's real because it's organic content of people just in the office and things like that. And I have candidates all the time say, hey, I love that video that you put out or things like that. So I think hearing that is what like reminds me to focus on it, right? Because I mean, we do a lot as recruiters. I can't always be like, oh no, I didn't post on LinkedIn the last 2 days. Like I, need to hurry up and get something out. So, just remembering that it is an important part of the job, and that although it comes second to some things, it should not come last.
Yeah, definitely. So I told you before we recorded, I wasn't going to give you any curveballs, but did want to kind of expand on this a little bit just because I work with a lot of people in our internship program and a lot of people who are transitioning from the classroom come to me with questions too. And I always talk about the importance of networking and how much you can build your brand just through that on LinkedIn. But it's an overwhelming process, right? Because you don't want to just connect and follow any and everyone. You want it to be, a beneficial two-way street. And you don't want to just start throwing out questions or asking for favors. You have to really kind of build these organic relationships. So how important is networking? How do you try to go about those processes of, finding the right people to connect with, especially in recruiting where we're always looking for candidates, we're always looking for, clients that we can support, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And I always say the same thing when I'm at career fairs and stuff. Like, I'm like, seriously, take this opportunity, find everyone you get a business card from on LinkedIn after. I'm like, listen, you could have told me the same thing in college. And I was like, yeah, whatever. But now that I'm the adult, nagging you, I mean it. But yeah, it really is important in recruiting because, like I said, if someone maybe doesn't fill the role at that time, you never know when you can call them back later. So I'm always happy to have made the connection and have the conversation. I like connecting with other people in the industry. I like connecting with other recruiters and seeing what they're doing and their tactics. So it's kind of it's about connecting with candidates, but also just other professionals, in your network as well. I think is so important. And I think when trying to find, going beyond the connection and being like, oh, I want to message someone and have a conversation, my advice is like, try to find something that you have in common already, right? So you're not just sending the random, hey, happy to connect. How are you? Or, whatever LinkedIn generates for you at the bottom.
Right.
I'll say, oh, I saw that I just missed you. I graduated right before you started at, the same school I went to, or something, or noticing something about their headline photo, or just something like that, where you can make it a little bit more personal. I think makes them feel like, oh, they're not copy and pasting this message and sending it to everyone.
Right. Yeah. Definitely avoid the copy pasta when you're on LinkedIn for sure.
Yeah.
So, last question I have is one that everyone who joins me on Maximize Monday gets, tailored specifically for recruitment. But I always like to go to that piece of advice that you maybe received along the way. If people are coming to you, I'm stuck in my search. Is there a piece of advice that kind of helped you along the way, or for those who are looking to get into recruitment, anything specifically that you would tell them in terms of trying to stand out, build their brand, and be successful in the field?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in general, for job seekers, like I definitely always say, put yourself out there as much as you can, network, make connections, find the person who posted that job, reach out to them, find someone who works there, ask them about it. I know can be a tough market out there, and sometimes you're applying to too many jobs to even remember, who called you about what. So always just I think just try to be organized in that. I think you're as a recruiter, I think we appreciate it a lot when someone's not like, wait, what role is this for again? Because that's happened. I mean, it happens, and I get it because people are mass applying. But I think putting in more effort to make those conversations more personalized can go a long way. But and trying to get into recruitment, I do think there's benefit in starting at that agency level. I think you learn a lot very fast because it's high volume, and I think that's a great starting place, even if someone ends up wanting to go the more corporate level, and then you're not so focused on one job or one industry most of the time either, which I think is great. But I always say, if you're someone who really likes talking to people, you like doing something that's meaningful. I mean, you're literally helping someone find something to make a living, right? To support their family. So it absolutely is the best and can be so rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Taylor, thank you again for taking the time out of your day to join me on the show here. Very beneficial stuff, a lot of good insight in terms of the recruiting industry, how to get into it and succeed there. So if you're not following Taylor at this point, make sure you do that. Otherwise, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next Monday.